Father John in Canada.
Hey, Father John is back.
Hey.
Hello.
How are you?
Doing good today.
Doing well. I'm glad you decided to call back. I know last time we talked, I said that I would have trouble talking about anything but COVID with you. But after your call, I talked to a good number of people who said, look, there's other good information and conversations that you can have. And so I'm glad you called in.
Yes, and I actually have a specific talk that I thought V would be interested in.
Yeah, let's hear it.
Okay, if I'm not mistaken, you were Roman Catholic, correct?
I was not. We have another host on a show who has been. I was not. I was a non-denominational Christian back in the day.
Okay.
I was baptized Catholic.
Pardon me?
I was baptized Catholic. I don't know if that helps.
Okay. Well, so I thought someone had mentioned, I guess I was a bit mixed up, that they, after leaving whatever community it was, they were accused of not truly being a believer in the first place.
Yes, that is accurate.
Okay, well, my way of dealing with that actually has to do with Roman Catholic canon law, so I don't think that would be applicable for you.
Is it the once a Catholic, always a Catholic kind of deal there?
Well, see, it's kind of a confusing thing. It depends whether you're a convert or whether you're what's called a cradle Catholic.
Right.
Because they do have their confirmation at an older age, unlike the Orthodox. And with their canon 889, it says it's subsection 2. It says to receive confirmation licitly outside of danger of death requires that a person who has the use of reason be suitably instructed, properly disposed, and able to renew the baptismal promises. So if you don't feel you were properly instructed, especially if you have a specific area where you completely disagreed before receiving their confirmation, you could quote this canon and say, well, you guys didn't properly instruct me, therefore it makes my confirmation illicit.
Interesting. Loopholes in theology.
Yeah, I mean...
Right.
Okay.
Well, it's actually not theology. I had a Roman Catholic bishop say to me once, this is not theology, this is canon law, which... to me, I have to full-heartedly agree with him, which means it's not particularly useful.
Well,
I'm curious then.
Oh, yes?
Yeah, kind of going off that, because we've got you on the line, and you raised an interesting point, and I kind of want to dig a little bit here, if you don't mind.
Mm-hmm.
So my question then is, that's a cool workaround. So if you wanted to say, hey, I was never a Catholic, this is why I'm quoting subsection B of, wherever, then that's interesting. That's a cool workaround. Do you believe that kind of thing actually has any bearing on whether or not you were saved?
No, none whatsoever. It's an easy way to deal with Roman Catholics. Because they're very much tied into legalism and stuff. And so what I actually did when I realized what was wrong with Roman Catholicism was I executed a late sentete excommunication upon myself, and that's according to Canon 1364, because I had publicly taught, according to Roman Catholic perspective, heresy as a catechist, bringing people into Roman Catholicism.
Sure.
So I actually had to retroactively do that because I had switched. I guess it's transferred, is what it is, from Roman Catholicism to the Ukrainian Catholics, and they don't actually have late sentete excommunications in their code of canon law because they've given a separate code. I think it was 1984 they were given their old code rather than using the Roman Catholic code.
May I?
Yeah, go for it.
So, Father John, you said that you're convinced of one form of Catholicism and another form of Catholicism is heresy. And so there has to be something in there.
No. Actually, it depends what you mean by the word Catholicism, because I transferred from Roman Catholicism to Well, no. It's called Ukrainian Catholic. They're part of the Uniates.
Okay.
There was a number.
Right.
This gets into church history, but they're under the Pope of Rome. They're part of the Roman Catholicism.
Okay.
But I've left them altogether. I have no connection with them now.
Why?
Yeah, you're Orthodox, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Why? So it sounds like you made a decision, and I'm assuming that you used the best evidence available to you to make an informed decision to leave from one very specific version of a religion to another very specific version. What convinced you? And really, ultimately, what I want to know is, what convinced you convince us to be a part of it? I mean, what tools did you use to get from A to B?
Well, the thing is that I had, when I attempted to become Roman Catholic, I was a convert as an adult. And I was under the mistaken belief that the Orthodox and Roman Catholics were part of the same community. They just had divisions within themselves. That's a common belief among many Roman Catholics, and that's what I understood without having fully investigated Orthodoxy, to know that they were actually very different.
Okay,
And
so why one over the other?
Why one over the other?
Yeah.
Well, see, originally I thought they were all the same, and that the divisions between them needed to be healed.
I get that.
There's actually four groups.
Well, hold on. I don't really care about the other groups. I care about you. We're talking to you, John. And so...
Right, exactly. But the thing is that this is what I believed. I believed that all four of these groups were the one true church. So that was the Roman Catholics.
Right. What convinced you otherwise?
Pardon me?
What convinced you otherwise?
Of what? Oh, that they're not all the same.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I actually was finding more and more differences, and I was building philosophical bridges to try to make it so that they're still the same. But what actually was the last straw was when I took a course in scholastic philosophy and realized that the source of Roman Catholic theology is it's actually human intellect. It's basically what Friedrich Nietzsche said or saw, that they were just dealing with philosophical concepts of God. So,
I don't think the Catholics consulted with Nietzsche. I
never said that. I said I agree with what he said. That what he saw was that they were just dealing with philosophical concept of God. That's their version of theology, philosophical discourse on divinity, which is the pagan definition of theology.
Well, hold on. I know that's your definition for them, because they would say something otherwise. I'm sure.
Actually, no. Actually, that is the classical definition.
Yeah. So. All right.
I saw that when I saw this course. I saw that is where they're actually deriving the theology from, rather than through divine revelation.
John, you're doing the no true Scotsman thing, and you're being prescriptivist about it. Let me be very, very clear here. If somebody were to call, hold on, let me finish my sentence, John. Please let me finish. Please. When someone calls in, they say they want to talk about faith. I have a definition of faith, and they have a definition of faith. And our definitions might be different, so we can talk past each other. The same is true for belief. The same is true for a lot of those definitions. And so I'm not out to invalidate someone else's definition. Instead, what I want to do is meet them where their definition is, and then have a productive conversation. And so if you're saying, by definition, I made this choice, then what I want to explore is what motivated you to make the choice? Because if we're going to argue about definitions, I feel like the proper thing for me to do is find a Roman Catholic who disagrees with you, so you two could have the conversation. Otherwise, I'm filling in a spot that I don't feel is appropriate.
Right. No, I understand, but to realize that this is not my definition. These are definitions that were put out many centuries ago, so it has nothing to do with me, and it has nothing to do with the no true Scotsman fallacy, because these are documented. It's got nothing to do with me. My
Okay.
opinion.
Okay,
opinion
Father
is
John,
completely irrelevant.
John, can we,
Yes.
can I ask a question?
Yes.
Okay, so moving away from definitions for a minute here, you said something that I found very interesting, which was it was a philosophical exercise, right? It was human intellect building, as you said, kind of philosophical bridges in a way that was very maybe logical, and like it dealt with logic and it dealt with philosophy, but it wasn't concrete. It didn't have anything to do with the real world necessarily. That is very similar to my experience as well. As I was deconverting, I was realizing that a lot of what I had been taught in the various traditions that I was exposed to was actually this building of philosophical bridges to get to conclusions that felt right or felt good or, backed up prior belief. So my question is, what is different about orthodoxy? How is that not building philosophical bridges? What about that is different than what you're saying Roman Catholics are doing?
There's no philosophical bridges to build in Orthodoxy.
How do you mean?
Well, I'm not quite sure what you mean.
Well, do you not have
idea-
a philosophy, a theology, a method of talking about the way God works in the world in Orthodoxy? I would imagine all those fall under some kind of philosophy or theology.
We would have to get behind the definition of theology then, because we view that very differently than just mere philosophy. See
mere philosophy. Okay. So wait. So I kind of So I view theology as kind of a subset of philosophy that deals with God and ontological states of the world and the supernatural and all of that. Are you saying it's a completely different category than philosophy? How are you defining these?
Well, see, yeah, exactly. What you just defined is extremely common, as I was mentioning before with Eric, where it's just it's actually the lowest form of theology, which is a philosophical discourse on divinity, and this is what the pagan Greeks did. And really,
fascinating. Okay. All right. So
okay.
This is interesting to me. I'm enjoying this. So there's theology as a larger concept, and then underneath that is a smaller philosophical discourse about God and about the universe, which you would consider to be a subset of theology. What's the rest of it? I'm imagining there's probably some history in there as well. You seem to like church history a little bit, so there's probably that, right? But what else is in theology if not talking about the ontological existence of a creator or a God?
Well, Scripture itself is often referred to theology. Prayer is a higher form of theology, and the highest form of theology is union with God.
Oh, okay.
So you're using
I see where
theology
you're
in a
going.
weird way.
You're using theology in a very strange way. Is that?
Well, this is actually how the Orthodox use the word theology, and why all other religions or ideas are actually at the lower level.
Okay.
But other religions believe that they also pray and have unification with God. They may not call it theology, but they also have that same experience or claim to. Who are you to say that they don't have access to that higher realm of theology?
Well, if I were to not say that, then I would actually be denying my own faith, because if we believe we are the one true faith, how could we possibly say that we're not?
That feels like circular logic to me, though, doesn't it? We are the one true faith because we are the one true faith because we are the one true faith, right? What are you using to back that up apart from the claim that you are the one true faith?
Okay, well, see, that's a completely different. I didn't make any statement defending that we are one true faith. I just said we believe that.
Okay, so why do you believe that?
Why do I believe that?
Yeah.
Well, there's many reasons. Many people come to that place various ways, and I don't think it's particularly irrelevant. I'm not.
Oh, that is
Really?
the most relevant thing
No.
we've talked about on this call. That's what we ask people. What do
Okay.
you believe and why? You believe that you are part of the one true faith, and we're asking why.
Can
Why?
somebody come to the right answer for the wrong reasons?
It simply has been my experience. This is what I believe.
That's not good enough. And I'm sure you wouldn't expect that to be good enough for other people. And I'll tell you why. What if I told you that I was rooting around in my own made up holy book and it told me that you were right? And so now I'm coming and going, I know that it's true because my fictitious book says it's true. Would you accept that? Maybe I had a bad dream. Maybe I looked in my alphabet soup and saw, something in there. Are all of those good ways to get to your religion?
Well, if that's how someone has chosen to do it, I can't deny the fact that that is what they did.
That's terrible.
The reality.
Well,
Don't you
okay,
want people
so
to believe things for good reasons?
we're not
I do
asking
have
whether or
friends
not we
who-
believe they've come to a conclusion based on evidence,
Right.
however good or bad. That's not what we're asking.
The thing is,
John,
people have had their experiences, they have the reasons, and I'm not going to invalidate those experiences and reasons.
No, that's not
And-
that's not how you
and
get
the
to
thing is
truth, though. You did invalidate experience and reasons before when you said that Catholic theology was not accurate and was a bad way of getting to the truth. You recognized that and you left an entire church denomination because you recognize that there are bad ways to get to evidence. So why not hold Orthodox feet to the fire as well?
As I said, it had to do with experience. It was not my experience that you get to the ultimate truth through scholastic endeavors, through intellectual process, through philosophy.
So you're
That
saying
was my
that this is purely experiential and that you are not making any claims about the universe outside of your experience of it?
Yes.
Okay, so God does not exist outside of your head?
No, because the reality that I have experienced is outside of my head.
You're still talking about your experience. If you're only relying on your own experience, dude, then yeah, it's all in your head.
I know, but that's the same as everyone else.
So here's the thing.
Like
I'm not dedicating my life to something unless I have good reason to, which is why we need to look for evidence for the things that we accept to be true so that we can make sure that we're not wasting our time or possibly doing something dangerous. It's the same reason why we investigate whether or not somebody, should take essential oils instead of going to the doctor.
Yes, and all that comes down to your experience. If you had an experience of those things.
Yeah, but no, absolutely not. So if you, instead of going to get cancer, right?
Explain to me. Oh, sorry.
No worries. There's probably a delay. If you had the choice to go and get radiation therapy, chemotherapy for your cancer, and somebody else said, no, Reiki and this kind of massage or this kind of essential oil will do it instead, then no, it's not just up to your opinion. You want to find what's backed by evidence and what's replicable, because you don't have more than one shot at that a lot of the time.
Exactly. And so you go by what you have experienced.
No, you don't.
When you look at the evidence, you have experience looking at that evidence. That is your experience.
You look at the evidence.
So
that's the key word
your
there.
Your experience in looking at that evidence. So
okay, we're going back to a circular logic, though. We're saying experience is evidence and evidence is experience.
No, you experience evidence.
Okay, what is your evidence that you have experienced that convinced you that your faith was the one true faith?
We will use Eric's example there with the cancer. So when I had cancer, I had a lot of experience. My brother-in-law is an oncologist. I went to the actual hospital that I'd been in before when he was checking on his experiments there when he was a student, and I experienced the information they gave me, and I made the decision to follow the course of chemo and stuff that they told me to follow. That was my experience. Since then, I've experienced a lot of other evidence with people using cannabis products and stuff like that, and with what I have experienced, seeing people do this, what I experience, the evidence that I see is that there's a lot of value in these cannabis therapies, and there's a lot of pharmaceutical misdeeds being done within the medical profession. That is my experience. That is what I have seen.
So
And
Father John,
yes,
I get what you're saying. I do.
right, right.
So there are things that we can identify as true in the world outside of our experience, right? You can learn about a place that you've never been to.
Right, but you have experienced evidence about that, haven't you? I mean, you don't believe in places that you've never heard of before because they're not within your realm of experience.
Right, and then you
haven't even heard of them.
And
you are not conscious of
hold
their
on. I think you're conflating something here, man. So just because you experience something does not mean that all experiences are valid, right? I can also have a lucid dream or night terrors.
Mm-hmm.
I could be suffering from something going terribly wrong in my brain. Is that experience just as valid and just as true? Oh, not valid, but true as anybody else's experience? If I said that, I dreamt that I was flying like Superman, that is just as true as somebody who said that they drove to work today? It's just my experience. So who are you to say that it didn't happen?
Well, you're saying if you experience a dream of flying.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah,
because
and I was convinced that it actually happened.
The dream of flying.
No. In this example, I'm convinced that it actually happened.
Know the difference between an experience of a dream and an experience of being awake. You can also have similar experiences while awake. Delusional stuff while you're awake.
Okay, so how do you discount delusions?
People experience this.
Right, and so
a person who is going through a delusion cannot differentiate between what is real and what's not. Their experience is that delusion.
Okay, so how do you determine between an experience that is a delusion and an experience that is not a delusion?
Something that maps to reality.
Right.
That is the important thing that everyone has to figure out.
Well, how did you figure it out?
How did I figure it out? What specific are you referring to? Because, there's been...
Come on, John. You know what specific we're referring to. We've been asking you the whole time.
Which specific?
That your religion is the one true faith. That's the claim you made. That's what you said you believed. Yeah. So how did you determine that was mapped to reality versus a delusion?
Well, okay. Well, the thing is that I had believed that before while I was Roman Catholic, and I believed that the Roman Catholics, what's commonly referred to as the Eastern Orthodox, as well as the Oriental Orthodox, and what's referred to the Assyrian Church of the East, were all one church, and that was the true faith. That's what I believed.
Why did you believe it?
That was not true. Why did I believe that?
Yeah.
Well, that goes farther back to where I realized that because I grew up within the Protestant faith.
Okay.
And I had realized that it was that sola scriptura was did not make any sense. It logically contradicts itself. Looking at history, and I realized that was wrong, and that what was needed was apostolic succession.
Okay, so hold on. So scripture alone, you're saying, is not sufficient. Why is scripture alone not sufficient? Why would your God create a system where they give you the scripture, but that scripture is not sufficient? I guess I should ask you one of those, huh? I asked you a bunch of them. Let's start with...
it's actually very simple. It's very simple. Who wrote the New Testament?
We have
some people who we know, other people we don't.
Yeah, we have been able to track back to an author like Paul.
Did the Christian faith exist before they wrote it?
No.
It obviously did. It obviously existed. Otherwise, what were they writing about?
The Hebrew faith.
So the reality is that you can't base a religion on some sacred text.
Wait, hold on a second. Hold on. So please correct me if I'm wrong. Doesn't Christian literally translate to follower of Christ?
Yes.
Okay, was there a Christ before Christ?
No.
Did we have access
But
to
we were
any
talking.
kind of
We
Christ before
were
Christ?
talking about the Bible, not Christ. That's what I'm making the distinction here. We don't
The
follow the
distinction
Bible.
that you
We
made
follow
was with
Christ.
Christendom.
Okay, but
Pardon me?
John, you
Yeah.
understand, you have a really good understanding of church history, it sounds like, and you know how stories change over time, right? And how they begin
Mhm.
and then how they shift.
Yes.
So Christianity, as we understand it, didn't exist before the Bible. Christ, Jesus, Yeshua, whatever the name was, may have existed as a rabbi who was preaching one of many apocalypse myths. There were multiple cults at the time that were offshoots of Judaism. I believe there were at least 30 during that span of time. Yeshua was probably one of them. And then after he was killed, his followers continued along. And Paul came into the situation and took that mythology and took that story and built it into something else. And that's where we get a lot of Protestant, at least, versions of Christianity, is from Paul's letters and Paul's interpretations of the stories of this quote unquote prophet Yeshua. So I'm confused about why this matters. Like, we understand how the myth started, and we understand that Paul didn't make it up out of thin air, probably, and that there was a myth that is the basis of this. But I don't understand why we're going down this rabbit hole.
Well, because what you just described is not the history of the Orthodox, and we don't believe any of that.
So in my experience, that is accurate, and that maps to reality. So how do we tell if my experience of the historicity of the Bible and your experience of the historicity of the Bible, who's right?
Well, that's something that everyone has to figure out. That is a very important question.
We're trying, man. We're really trying to figure it out. That's why we're having this conversation. You seem to have answers. We want them.
We just want reliable methods.
Well, you want to know how I see it as opposed to how you described it?
Well, I want to know, you're saying that that's not what you believe, and you clearly have a very strong belief in something else. So I want to know, hey, if I'm wrong, I want to know why I'm wrong. Please tell me where I'm going wrong and why your experience of this historicity is better than mine. Because you can't just say, well, mine is different, and then expect me to have any kind of change of heart, right?
Okay. Yeah. So I can explain how I believe it. Okay. I
don't want to know how. I want to know why. I really don't care about the specifics at this point, because at this point you're just making claims.
Right. Oh, exactly. But okay, why do I believe that? Well,
yeah.
So you've asked me why I became Orthodox, but
no, okay, all right.
So, Father John,
the thing is that there's many questions here, so there's many of these questions I could answer. So
Fair
I
enough.
want to know which question exactly it is you want me to answer.
Well, let's dive into the core of the show. What do you believe and why?
Okay.
So when we were asking why you moved from one understanding of Catholicism to another, is because we're thinking, okay, obviously Father John has some kind of evidence. There's something that pushed him to go, you know what? No, this telling of Catholicism is correct, and this one is not. And so that could give us some insight into what you're using to determine what is true and what is not true.
Okay.
Do you understand why that question counted? And really, ultimately,
absolutely. And I attempted to explain that to you before, but you thought it was a no true Scotsman argument. So
because yes,
that's the reality of it. I can't say they're wrong without saying they're wrong.
Right, but we want to know why they're wrong.
It doesn't mean you're right. If you point to somebody and say they're wrong, that doesn't make you automatically right. You need to have evidence for your beliefs. And if it's situated on pointing fingers at other people and you have no evidence to yourself, then you still have no good reason to believe it. It's like sitting back and saying, that's silly that you believe in fairies. That's silly that you believe in Bigfoot. But me, man, I've got good evidence for aliens, and me and Zeno, we're tight. Like, dude, you need to have good reason for your beliefs too.
Yes, everyone has their own reasons for their belief, and I'm not going to deny the fact that they have those reasons. And I attempt
No one's
to
denying
explain
that you have reasons. We want to make sure that they're good ones, because that's how we determine what's helpful.
I will attempt to explain this before, but you will have to let me actually continue and explain it. As I was saying, when I was taking that course in scholastic philosophy, I realized that the basis of Roman Catholicism is scholasticism. It's belief in the human intellect to discover the truth. That is the basis of Roman Catholicism. I found that to be true. And I knew that that was not the basis of Christianity.
How do you know that?
So I had no choice. Because Christianity, according to the Orthodox, is something that's given as divine inspiration. It has to do with humility to realize that our fallen human intellect is not capable of coming to such truths, that it has to be given to us. I totally understand. I had a friend who is Jewish, who do you know what Jewish birthright is? Yes. You're talking about the Celtic Jews, right?
I'm talking about the program that Israel does that brings young Jewish people to Israel and teaches them.
Sorry. I misheard you. Sorry.
It's okay. That's okay.
My friend talked about the Druids.
No, Jews, the Hebrew people.
Sorry.
No worries. So he went on birthright, and he came back, and he had the exact same reason. I took a class, and in that class, I learned that this is true. And that it took him a while to sit back and actually reason through whether or not it was correct for him to believe what was going on in that class. It sounds like you're saying, I believe this is true because my class taught me that this is true.
Except I never took a class to teach me this.
So how did you come to the conclusion?
Well, I just knew that this was actually an aspect of Christianity.
I just knew. Okay.
Yes.
V just knows that it's not. Now what?
Okay.
Now what? Are you both right?
Well, one of us is obviously wrong.
Okay. How do you determine that?
Well, each one's going to have to determine that for themselves.
No, because one of you is wrong. Don't you care about who's right? I mean, dude, don't you care?
Okay, well, since I am a Christian, I would follow the example of Christ, correct?
Dude, there are so many different sects of Christianity. Don't expect me to follow you on that line. Just go.
No, wait. You hear me out here.
Okay,
now, the thing is, because
sure. If you're going to follow the example of Christ, then I would say that Christ said, I will not cast my pearls before the swine.
No. When Christ taught, he taught them. And if they left, they left. He's not going to force his opinions on others. If they want to follow him, they are free to do so.
Yeah, tell that to the money changers in the temple.
What's this?
Tell that to the money changers. I'm sure he let them go. Oh no, he overturned the tables, didn't he? Now you're being selective in your scripture. I don't know where to go.
No, we're not being selective. No, we're not being selective. We're taking two specific examples that have very different contexts, and you have to understand them in their context. When he taught, he did not tell the money changers to follow his teachings. He told them to quit making the house of his father into a den of thieves. It was very different. He wasn't teaching them anything.
That sounds like
my example. But when he was talking about, that you have to eat my body and blood, and people left, he didn't chase after them, try to force them. No, you misunderstood me, or try to force that. He turned to his apostles and said, "Will you leave me also?" He didn't force anybody to follow him.
Okay, well then I think if you're
that is the example to follow.
Okay, it's been 40 minutes. We have other callers on the line.
Okay.
When you call back, one thing I would love to talk about, V, I don't know about you, but if your God just leaves it to people to make up their own minds and will punish people in hell if they're wrong, and that's good enough reasoning, I think that either you're being way too laissez-faire or your God's a monster. And I would love to talk about whether or not that God can be good on the next weekend.
So the next time I phone in, we'll talk about hell then.
The problem of evil is
Sure,
specific.
sounds good to me.
All
Yep.
right.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Thanks, John.